On today's show, we have none other than Dhiraj Mukherjee, the co-founder of Shazam.
And suddenly everything changed for us. We were climbing the charts and we made it to, number 2 of all the apps out there.
And eventually sold to Apple for $100 million. Now, Dhiraj used this as a springboard to become an impact investor, investing in many companies looking to change the world, from neurodiversity to life longevity to the future of talent, and also a clever bet on OpenAI.
I'm an early investor in OpenAI. The team which are working on it now don't really know what it'll look like in 3 years or 5 years from now. And what's really powerful is that it's the technology which is enabling these possibilities.
So tune in to find out how you can get advice and inspiration for your future success and fulfillment. Many people will know you for Shazam, but I think we'll come on to find out that doesn't define you. But clearly it's a key thing to talk about. So tell us about some of the highs and lows of Shazam itself.
I mean, this is one of those classic stories where I was good friends with a guy called Chris Barton. We were drinking buddies, and we said we should start a company just because everyone else seems to be doing it. And he had a friend at Berkeley Business School called Philippe, and they had agreed to be entrepreneurs as well. So the three of us sort of fell in without any ideas. So we'd go out and have a few beers and try to come up with ideas, and they were mostly terrible. But Chris had the idea of identifying music using your mobile phone. And that's how the idea for Shazam was born. And what's ridiculous is that even now, almost 25 years later, people say it's a good idea. So back then, mobile phones were in their infancy, and it was a completely different environment. But we set about, creating this technology and starting this business. And it was an incredible roller coaster ride, and I'm happy to describe some of the lows as well as the highs. But in a nutshell, we had no idea what we were doing, but we had to figure it out as we went along. And, lucky enough to be here to tell the story today.
Was there a specific moment when you just knew you had a piece of gold in your hands?
I remember a specific moment, which was in 2008. So just in terms of timeline, we started the company in 2000. When the dot-com boom was in full swing. And we were like, this is it, go, go, go. And by 2001, the whole internet bubble had burst. And there was literally blood on the street of dead startups. And that was, a really low point, having to let go some of the really early people we'd hired who had put in, blood, sweat, and tears to get the business off the ground. And for many years, we were on the brink of bankruptcy. We literally didn't have any sensible way of making money. In 2007 was when the iPhone launched. And in 2008 was when the App Store launched. And suddenly Shazam, which used to be a phone-based service, became one of the first apps on the iPhone. And Apple ran, TV campaigns telling people, like, what is an app and how can you use your new phone to identify music? And suddenly everything changed for us. And we were climbing the charts of the apps on this iPhone. And we made it to, number 2 of all the apps out there. I think it was like the torch was number 1. But that was the moment that we knew, we finally have a breakthrough.
Dhiraj, you got to tell me, when you talk about that journey, and it was an incredibly long journey.
Yeah.
How did you stay resistant, persistent, on track, perhaps pivoting around as well when needed to? What did that look like?
Yes, I think we were completely single-minded as entrepreneurs. So we never took no for an answer. That was the first principle, I guess. But not, we didn't sit around and brainstorm. We just acted in that way. And then the second, we just literally never gave up. And there were many times when we were on the brink. We were in board meetings discussing whether we were trading insolvent, which is punishable by, incarceration. And we decided, no, we had just enough, £4.33 in the bank to keep going. But we never thought to ourselves, maybe I should get a job. Maybe I should pack it in. Maybe I should do something else. That thought didn't ever cross our minds.
What was the personal toll that took place as a consequence of that? Because I imagine there's people around you who too would be relying on the success.
That's a great question. So we worked incredibly hard, and this is not something which I talk about, but this is true of, I think, most entrepreneurs today. I had no hobbies. My social life just revolved around my teammates. And I'm not sure about my diet and nutrition. I would not recommend it to anyone today, but we made it through. And today, when I see entrepreneurs who have families or looking after kids or, might be caring for, older parents over a longer period of time, hats off to them, because that was not our reality. We were just sort of super focused and doing whatever it took to get through.
You've mentioned before that you feel you had some luck, and many of our guests have talked about feeling lucky. But of course, you make your own luck. So what was the thing that you really brought to the situation to make it lucky?
One aspect of the luck that we had was we got along really, really well as co-founders, and the entire team felt that they were fully invested, even though, the joke was that success was always 2 years away. So we were always sort of chasing this dream. But just to give you an example, we were trying to get a letter from a mobile operator to say that they would work with this fledgling company. And we called at the time, it was BT, and we called the representative 10 times and we got no answer. So Chris got fed up and he asked me to try. So I called him 10 times as well, still got no answer. To cut a long story short, we left 44 voicemails before he called us back and said, yeah, let's have a meeting next week. And so that's what it took to create the luck.
We talked a little bit about that moment with Shazam where you knew that you were onto something. Mm-hmm. And I think the stat goes that it took you 10 years to achieve 1 billion downloads.
Yeah.
And then it took you another 1 to achieve the other exponential growth. Those are the next big leap.
Yeah.
So you clearly are a believer in exponential growth. And so maybe talk to that notion of how you were able to, what did you do in that following year to then see that rise in exponential growth factor?
We had a vision of how people would use Shazam. So anytime you hear a song, it could be in a bar, in a cafe, it could be at a club, you'd be able to use your mobile phone in that moment to capture that song. And it had to be in real time, it had to be accurate, it had to be affordable, it had to be right. And when we started, it was just a phone-based service to an IVR system, and you got a text message with the name of the song and the artist, which was very clunky. But when the right technology showed up, then that vision could actually be realized in terms of it's really easy to use, it's instantaneous, etc., etc. So we basically rode the horse that we had been training for several years. And that's what I see today as well, which is you see these entrepreneurs who have a view of the future. And now you have new technologies like Gen AI, which makes the impossible possible. And if you look back in 5 or 10 years from now, you'd say, oh, it was such a small, little, simple idea, but now you can see how it's grown and flowered. So it was not doing anything different as such. It was just carrying on the momentum, all that hard work, behind the scenes, which finally came and saw the light of day.
You mentioned Gen AI makes the impossible possible.
Yes.
Tell us more about what you think it's going to do for society.
What's amazing about Gen AI is that it's a process of discovery even for the engineers who are working on it. So I'm a relatively early investor in OpenAI, and the team which are working on it now don't really know what it'll look like in 3 years or 5 years from now, because that's the nature of R&D. That's the nature of invention. And what's really powerful is that it's the technology which is enabling these possibilities. In Shazam's case, people sometimes ask me, what made you successful? And it was the technology. It was the brilliance of my co-founder, Avery, who created an algorithm which did the impossible. And that allowed us to both create the category of music identification over your mobile and then actually dominate that category for 18 years until we sold to Apple. And it's the same thing, I think, now with Gen AI, which is it's the people who are, on the cutting edge, which empower big companies and startups and individuals to discover ways of being more productive or more creative or inventing services which are just, glimmer in someone's eye today. So the short answer is It's impossible to predict, but it definitely is possible to get on the ride now and then to, take that journey along with the pioneers in the field.
Dhiraj, I've heard you talk about the analogy with the driving down a road 100 miles in, but yet you can only see as far as your headlights, and I love that analogy. And I think it plays really well into this thought process I was describing with either OpenAI or both Shazam as well. You could never have known the technology that would have enabled Shazam to scale the way it had at the beginning of the process. I mean, that actually takes a high level of ambiguity and resilience to be able to just kind of continue down driving through that path.
Yes, and if I can go back to a question which you asked me earlier about being in the right place at the right time and getting lucky. So there's an element of manufactured serendipity. So it's about how do you get lucky to be in the right place at the right time? By looking out for it, basically. And that would be my reflection on, what's happening in the world today, whether we're talking about technology, Gen AI in this case, or whether it's about climate and sustainability, or whether it's about Generation Z entering the workforce and the workforce of the future. These are sort of big themes which are going to play out over the next decade. And we're going to look back and say, the world is so different in 2035, but what was it like in 2025? And the clues are here. It's just a question of tuning into them.
If technology was a critical underpin for Shazam, what role did marketing play?
Oh, marketing was absolutely essential. So I hired my boss and my boss's boss. So I was demoted twice as an entrepreneur. And Vijay Solanki was our marketing director, and we worked very close together. And he's still a good friend 25 years later. He came from Unilever and from the media business, and he basically taught us everything there is to know about marketing. I actually had a document called Unscrambling the Marketing Egg, because in my head it was this mix. We didn't know who our customers were, we didn't know how to price it, we didn't know how much they were going to use it, we didn't know. Basically, we just had no clue. And when Vijay came with his formal marketing methods, he sorted it out in a matter of weeks and months and created order out of chaos. So I've got a huge belief in the discipline of marketing and the rigor of the thinking, and certainly experienced it firsthand in terms of getting our little business off the ground.
Dhiraj, you said that you weren't sure how to price Shazam, which goes to the core of the commercial model.
Yes.
And in fact, if anyone is using the app today, clearly it's a free-for-all use. So tell us a little bit more about the evolution of that commercial model and how you were able to sort of end up monetizing it.
Sure. So it was a perpetual quest for any way to make money. I will deflect the blame onto the music industry, which went through a traumatic period because of the old format of CDs, which were commercially viable, then gradually got attacked by piracy. And we had new services like iTunes, which launched. So initially, we charged users for the text message with the name of the song and the artist. And that was not particularly popular. We then sold ringtones. When iTunes launched, Shazam was the biggest affiliate partner. We sold hundreds of millions of dollars worth of songs on behalf of Apple, because 1 in 10 Shazams converted to a sale. And then you had streaming services like Spotify, and then we partnered with Spotify. When the App Store launched, the original app was paid for, and then Shazam grew so big that advertising was our biggest revenue stream because of the footprint, 30 million installed users in the UK. The day that Apple bought Shazam in 2018, they said no more ads. It just sort of obstructs the user experience, and the ads were gone. So we've had many, many different iterations, but the one thing we always kept faith in was, let's see if we can find a way to make money from this.
The only one question I have left, right, on Shazam is in and around the experience of then getting bought by Apple.
Yes.
And I'd love to hear a little bit more just about how that sort of, the inception of that, how that kind of happened and sort of the process through.
Sure. Now, Apple knew Shazam very well because we'd been partners for many, many years, from the early days of iTunes through to the launch of the App Store. And there came a point where they just felt that it would be a great fit with the Apple ecosystem So, for instance, we integrated into Siri. So if you say, "Hey Siri, what's that song?" That's powered by Shazam, for instance. And so it was just a really natural fit. But I have to be honest, it's like a dream come true, because it was a long-term romance, and it felt like it fit really well with, Apple is very music is very close to Apple's heart, and so we were delighted when that was the sort of end of that story, that journey.
Shazam has maybe been a brilliant platform for what's happened since, and you're a very passionate impact investor. So can you tell us how you got started in that direction?
When we got to 2009 and Shazam was really starting to take off, one of our investors was a storied venture capital firm called Kleiner Perkins, Caulfield and Byers from Silicon Valley. And their partner was Al Gore, who was former vice president of the US and really passionate about the climate. And he came and did a talk for us and expanded on how he believed we must all be involved in climate action. And that was a game changer for me. I'll never forget his talk and his message. So after we sold Shazam, I wanted to do something which gave back and to be able to support the next generation of entrepreneurs. And my particular focus or interest is in climate action, but I do invest across the sustainable development goals. But that was, for me, I think an inflection point was hearing Al Gore articulate his vision for the planet.
Many of your investments have been early stage, so you're obviously good at picking them, but maybe what's the one or two that got away and you think, oh, I wish I had?
When you're an early stage investor, the jury's out because you don't know if you've picked well or not until later. I think of it as being on a journey with the entrepreneur. And as long as I'm enjoying the journey, then it's okay. And what I mean by that is I try to back individuals and teams who are combining the goal of building a big sustainable business with creating a positive impact. So just to give you an example, I'm an investor in a company called Humanity, which is in the longevity space. And it's about extending one's health span, so the healthy years of one's life. And the CEO is Pete Ward, who's a good friend. And I thought of it as just a way of extending one's health span. He said, no. It's about having more productive human life, which can make a contribution. So he pointed out the impact aspect to me. And ever since then, I've fallen a little bit into this rabbit hole of health optimization and what does it take, whether it's diet, exercise, sleep, the right supplements, etc. And that's an example of what I've learned from this journey as well, which is it's personal, it's about society, and if we can do that on a wider scale, then actually it prevents a lot of costs and hardship at the end of one's life, which is what the reality was 50 or 75 years ago. So I think we continually progress, and who knows what's around the corner? Who knows what's going to happen in 5 years or 10 years? But I feel like one can accumulate knowledge as well as interest by sort of looking over the shoulders of the people who have that drive, that vision, that passion to make it so.
Dhiraj, you talk about the fact that the best entrepreneurs, innovators, business people have a really good combination of creativity and determination. And I wondered if you could speak a little bit more around those two concepts, and why do you believe that they are important in order to create a successful enterprise?
The word I use is change makers, and what does it take to be a change maker? And I think for me, it starts with inspiration. So who do you look up to? And in my case, Paul Polman, for instance, who is CEO of Unilever, is a tremendously inspiring figure and somebody who wants to change the world. And you say, okay, so taking a leaf from his book. And then it comes down to imagination. So it's about how can you envisage a future and envision something which is different from what the world looks like today. The third is about innovation. So what's the product? What's the service? What's What's the new magic which you're going to, create? And then if you put your mind to it, that's when you get your impact. That's when you can make a dent in the universe, as Steve Jobs, famously said. I call it creating an inflection point. And I'm talking, of course, about entrepreneurs here, but and I stand for entrepreneurs, but I'm equally thinking about big companies, which is, bring that innovation into the business, partnering with these startups, backing those entrepreneurs, supporting their journey. And every entrepreneur, this is, again, every story about a band has the same shape, every entrepreneur needs three things. They need capital. So an investor like myself provides a little bit of that. They need customers. So if you're a big company and you're thinking about how do I get on board this train, there's a plethora of companies out there who want to talk to you. And then the third is about connections. So opening up, whether it's, supply chains, distribution channels, international markets, etc. So it's all within our grasp. It's a question of tuning into that opportunity.
What would your advice be for future generation of talent? You've mentioned about AI literacy, but more generally, what would your advice be?
I think my advice for the future generation of talent is that, early in one's career, it's about skills and hard work. And then as one progresses, it becomes more about tacit knowledge, about relationships, about being able to see shades of gray. And it's a progression. And I think that the most successful leaders are not the ones who are resting on their laurels, but who are learning as they go. I think for young people who are starting out in their careers, it's about continuously sort of adopting new technology. It's really sad we get to a point where we start leaning on our experience, and that's the beginning of the end. So if we can constantly keep moving, keep journeying, keep adapting, that I think is the secret of both a long life as well as a long career, because we just don't know what the shape will look like in the future, but we know for sure it won't look like it looks like today.
So you're an investor in humanity, which is about extending productive life. What's possible in that context?
I think that what's possible in the context of human life is about getting a better understanding of the things which are fatal. So the work which has been done on cancer, for instance, another big area, very sadly, is things like dementia, Alzheimer's. And how do we prevent that earlier in our lives? And to a certain extent, I'm not medical at all. I know practically nothing about medicine, but the domain has evolved so much in the last 20, 30 or 40 years. We're talking now about lifestyle changes, and human beings are famously, resistant to change if it doesn't suit them. But I think it's partly about education, and it's partly about making these habits which will then allow for a longer health span, which is the as opposed to lifespan. As far as I'm concerned, I don't have any predictions, and I'm very much sort of early in my learning journey. But I can only believe it'll be a good thing if we have less crippling effects of age-related deterioration and accompanying illness.
It's a consequence that in all our lives, I'm sure we have those moments in time, those could but may not have, could have moments, and I wondered if what would you count as being maybe one or two of yours, if you could count to some of those examples that you've had?
Sure. I mentioned that I hired my boss, Vijay Solanki, our marketing director, and our CEO, Jerry Roost. And at that point, I felt that things were in a good place where I could actually leave Shazam, and I wanted to do something which gave back. So I joined Save the Children in the international fundraising domain to be able to give something back. And that was a really formative experience for me, because I learned all about the power of young people. And that's a belief which I bring with me today in the team which I've built, or the investments which I back, or really being able to relate to entrepreneurs starting out, and a little bit of the experience that I've accumulated over time, but being able to see the world through their eyes. So that was a sliding doors moment, which was an unusual kind of career move, but I'm so glad that I made that choice. And I think in a similar way, today, I still feel like I've got that sense of adventure, of exploring the unknown, of taking a chance. And as I mentioned before, you just never know as an investor what's going to play out and what's not. But I remember our chairman, Ajay from Shazam, who was our first investor, and we got turned down by almost every single investor we spoke to at the time because it just felt like too much of a crazy idea. But 10 or 15 years later, he put his arm around me. He's like, you really helped our fund to achieve what it has. It all worked out. So I'd love to be in that position in 10 or 15 years from now with my arm around one or more of the CEOs of the companies that, I've backed, who said, people didn't believe in us. We encountered all these problems, but working together, we got there in the end. So I don't know what that door looks like yet, but I try to walk through those doors when those opportunities arise today.
So of course, clearly climate action is a big on your agenda.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the kind of areas that you focus in on?
Yes.
And love to get your take on whether you think we're winning the race at the moment in this area.
What I see is that it's a topic that, it's a generational issue. Climate brings together business people, governments, charities, activists. So there's no one entity who can kind of attack this. And from my perspective, I'm a beginner to the field, so I'm trying to learn about renewable energy, for instance, the energy transition, but it's baby steps. And the way I went about doing it was to enlist some help from young people. So I ran a competition at the London School of Economics. Said, I'd like to be an impact investor. I'm looking for ideas. Can you help me out, please? And I had some fantastic teams of brilliant young people, including two 19-year-olds from the University of Southampton, who came up with this idea of investing in geothermal energy. And they put me in touch with the CEO of a company called Dandelion in the US, who said, oh, yes, we are actually looking for investment, but you have to move quickly. We've got a couple of weeks left. So I did the due diligence, put my money in, and co-invested alongside Bill Gates's Breakthrough Energy Ventures and Google Ventures, which is really unbelievable because it provides a perspective. It's like a front row view of the future, sitting alongside deep-pocketed investors who know exactly what they're doing. And that's what I feel is important. It's not about back in the entrepreneur days, it was us against the world, do whatever it takes. This is a team game. This is about collaboration. This is about partnership. And that's why, for instance, I'm an ambassador for Tech Nation's climate program, which has 35 startups in their program and looking for funding, looking to build their business. No one has ever heard of them, which is always true of, in 10 years from now, you look back and say, oh, you were backing Metris Energy back when, there were 5 people. And just that particular reference, for instance, they say they turn sunlight into revenue. So if you've got commercial buildings and you want to find out how to install solar panels and how do you optimize the energy you can generate from your installed base of properties, then Metris Energy can help you out. So it's just, for me, a combination of, learning as I go, which is something I've got a lot of experience with. And 2 is trying to, really partner with and support the change makers of the future. Not all of them will succeed, inevitably, but I think there should be some fantastic stories which come from these journeys, which are starting now.
You have tremendous energy for impact investing, and your eyes really light up. But you describe it as a learning journey. So what are you learning about that process, but also about yourself?
I see it as an unfair deal. So whenever I invest, I say, hey, this is for my learning, which is confusing for entrepreneurs because they think they're going to be learning from me. But the reality is that as an entrepreneur, what I've got in terms of tacit knowledge is how to get through the hard times, because inevitably you have those moments of doubt, of setback, of the butterflies in your stomach when you're going to run out of cash, for instance, or you're talking to a big investor and it could go either way. But the reality is that it's about, manufacturing the future. And there's a quote, I think it's Peter Drucker, who said that the best way to predict the future is to create it. And that's what I learned at Shazam. And frankly, I'm backing the entrepreneurs who have their goals set on making a difference. It might not play out exactly how they'd planned. There might be an unexpected twist or turn or new platform which makes their vision come true. But the learning journey is about how do you adapt? How do you keep moving? How do you roll with the punches? And that's something which, again, I feel I can bring to the party and then learn myself as well, which is how do you adapt in this decade and the next decade, not in the last decade or the last millennium.
Dhiraj, you talk about clearly creating the future being very important, as well as in some of your early answers talked about the role of being able to identify key trends to be able to then almost join the dots as you move forward. I wonder if you've got a perspective on how does an entrepreneur or a business person start to identify those key trends for the future that they could then use as enablers to then scale what they're doing.
Try to tune into weak signals. So little snippets of information which might not be obvious that they form a pattern. And I get that from having random conversations, spending time with clever people, trying to work outside my own domain of knowledge. So the less I know, the more likely I am to learn something new. And if I had to organize this, I see three main drivers, and this is true, I think, both in the corporate context as well as startups in general, which is, I call it tech, green, and youth. Those are the three big domains. Technology is fairly obvious, and the big beast in the room right now is Gen AI, and we've talked about it a little bit. I think in the green domain, and we talked about climate action and the energy transition, I think every big company, small company, startup needs to get involved with shaping the future of the planet. It's a responsibility that we have for collective action as leaders. And then finally, in the youth domain, I see a big change in the young people entering the workforce today. So they speak AI fluently, for instance. I know that the workforce of the future is going to be much more diverse than what we've had in the past, much more supportive of neurodiversity, as an example. And I try to support women and minorities through my investments as well, because technology does sadly still tend to be a more male-dominated industry. But sort of putting those things together, it's about sort of listening to young people and tuning into what are their needs, their desires, their goals, which haven't changed. From a human perspective, they're the same, but the solutions are different. And then really learning about technology and being able to get hands-on with the possibilities in order to be able to play a leadership role when it comes to the climate domain. So that would be my summary, I guess, of these moving parts. Yeah.
I love your optimism with regards to the future, and specifically around diversity. You mentioned neurodiversity in particular. Why do you bring that to the fore? I'm myself passionate in that area, but what do you think neurodiversity brings? So
I am an early investor and board member of a company called MeVite, which is run by a minority woman, Reham Sati, who's a neuroscientist by background from Oxford. Her partner, Vivek, is a computer scientist. And the premise is about avoiding unconscious bias in recruitment. The average recruiter looks at a CV for 6 seconds and makes a judgment based on your name or which school you went to, or do you play a particular sport that they can relate to? And that's just not good enough. So what MeVite does is anonymize a CV so you get the best candidate to match the job description. And what that allows is more women, more minorities to have roles that they may not have been able to access before. Now, I've become more and more fascinated by neuroscience over the last few years. I see neurodiversity both in my family and in my team. And what is fascinating is that in the past, those would have been considered potential handicaps or stumbling blocks. Today, I think we have a generation which truly understands that they can be superpowers, and that you can create environments which brings out the best in people who might want to work at a different time of day, or might need their quiet time, or might not be quite as enthusiastic in a meeting. And I had a great conversation just last week at the Association of British insurers, talking to Felicity Oswald, who I believe is the head of one of the big cybersecurity agencies in the UK, talking about actually actively encouraging the participation of neurodiverse talent in the workforce to enable the security of the country. Now, I don't want to misspeak, but I think forward-looking employers are really understanding the power which comes from the diversity, rather than sort of trying to fit, round pegs into square holes or vice versa.
You put your energy and enthusiasm into many good causes, whether that's around neurodiversity, as we talked, or Save the Children, or etc. You seem to be very values-led. In a nutshell, how would you describe your values?
I think that I believe in generosity and to be as honest as possible, recognizing one's true self. And what I mean by that is I try really hard to be myself, which sounds like a ridiculous statement, but I think we, to a certain extent, conform to society or expectations or what is considered, a suitable career path. But actually, we have our unique gifts, and to be able to invest in those and to be able to indulge in those is a quest. And I guess that, being from India, the morality, I guess, of someone like Mahatma Gandhi, who was always down to earth, always humble, And there's a great phrase I've heard before, which is pride builds walls and humility builds bridges. So I try to live by that in terms of, if I have anything to offer, then through the dialogue or through the conversation, and being able to partner with people who, as I said, one can look back on and say, we did this journey together. So those are my values.
You talk about everyone has a unique gift. What would be your unique gift?
I think my unique gift is about trying to switch off from the hustle and bustle and tune into the faint signals, as opposed to the go, 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 and the busyness and the attention deficit that we've sort of fallen into. So I'm well known in entrepreneur circles for being a big proponent of idleness. Now, this is not generally considered a strong suit, but I luxuriate in the concept of idleness and being able to have space to have conversations which might not be obvious, or to be able to take time out to allow the brain to work in the background and to come up with ideas which might not be obvious. Now, this is, as I was saying before, a tremendous luxury. But I think that, if one has the opportunity to seize that moment, and it could be 15 minutes of meditation, I think it can work absolute wonders. So I'm here to say, if you're allowing yourself some time off, please do. You have my full support.
There's two things that fly in the face of what I believe you're about, right? One, or what you're about being one, as you describe, that ability and luxury of idleness, and your whole experience and now your value set is in and around the long term, thinking ahead into the future.
Yeah.
And that's been your experience at Shazam and how long that took to achieve that, as well as what you're doing today with impact investing. However, if you switch on your mobile phone and you go onto any social media site, all that it's ever about is a whole load of hustle porn, get rich quick schemes, and you can do it too in, under 60 seconds type of stuff. And I think in many respects, that's quite damaging to the youth and the youth mindset of today, where it flies in the face of that persistence and determination and single-mindedness. And I wonder if you have a point of view about those people watching into those sort of, micro clips, as they were, sort of shadowing your experience that you've had of how you achieved success. What would you say to those people who are perhaps being influenced by some of those social media messages?
Sure. I mean, look, my startup journey didn't work out for me. We wanted overnight success, but it took us 18 years. So I learned patience the hard way, right? And so that was character building. And so I didn't get a chance to misspend my youth, which was the original goal, but I'm allowed to misspend my old age. So what I learned from that experience really is the virtue of patience. And, I think that my brother, for instance, works for the University of Peace in Costa Rica. And I learned a lot talking to his students. So I was there a long time ago and asked them, so when do you envisage world peace? Was it going to be next year, the year after? Like, no, it's a 20-year perspective. They are not in a hurry because the nature of the beast. And so I think if you're building something which is worthwhile, if you have an ambition, then it takes time and that kind of layers of, bringing people together and constructing something, which you can then look back and admire. So that's my belief, which I've acquired over time. And I think for those of us who are further on in their careers, you have the burden of experience. As a leader, you're meant to lead from in front. You're not allowed to say, I don't know. I have no clue. I'm making this up as I go along. But this is my privilege that I can say that. I can say, I have no idea how this is going to play out, but I'm going to learn. The more I can declare what I don't know, the better the chance I have of figuring it out. So it's about acknowledging that you don't have all the answers. You don't know exactly what's going to happen next, but then being able to invest in the people, the knowledge, the experiments, which shines a light into the unknown. And so that comes back to the privilege that we have of control of our time. Are we going to invest our time in the things which are demanding our attention, or focus it on the things which we don't know for a long-term outcome? And that would be, I guess, my advice, which is to direct that time and attention towards the black holes.
So Dhiraj, tell us, what advice would you have for senior or corporate leaders looking to get more involved in the type of work that you do?
Well, my takeaway from my experience as an entrepreneur, as well as working at big companies, is the need to stay fluid in one's thinking. Because big companies tend to be quite structured, and it's natural for human beings to want things to be predictable. Let's have a 5-year plan, an annual budget. But the reality is that the world is so dynamic, things are changing so quickly, that what we need to build in more is fluidity in one's thinking. So to be able to design processes to be more, adaptable, to be able to build in uncertainty into plans. And the best technology companies, for instance, work in that way. Software development, which used to be all about, can you plan the next year and a half, has now moved to agile development, which is all about quickly release and iterate from there. And that's my takeaway from my decades of experience, which is working with big companies and being able to adopt that mindset of fluidity and adaptability.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Dhiraj.
Well,
it's been absolutely tremendous.
My pleasure. Thank you for the great questions. I've really enjoyed this experience.